My name is Jen Bayer. I work for USGS and PNAP, and I'm going to be our host today for session 2 of the PNAP Fish Monitoring Work Group Pit Tag Data Analysis 2025 webinar series. You have been following along with us, I hope, as our second session, and this has been part of the Fish Monitoring Work Group events for quite a while. You probably heard about this from Meg Detloff, and I'm filling in for Meg today. So welcome, everyone. You can see the agenda for all 5 sessions on the slide we're sharing. The bold is today, of course, GitHub for data analysis projects, Ben Staton. Next week, we'll hear about applications to clean and organize your pit tag data. And the following week, some folks from Columbia Basin Research DART team up in Seattle. And then our last session will be beyond Pitagus. So we want to introduce you to some other pit tag systems and give those folks a chance to do some lightning talks. And also applying R and other tools from some USGS colleagues. So a great lineup to come. Let's move on to the next slide. A little bit of Microsoft Teams tips. If you aren't familiar, we are asking people to, mute yourself and turn your camera off during the meeting, largely to avoid distractions. You can raise your hand with questions or comments. You can put them in the chat. And when it's appropriate to raise your hand when we notice you and ask you to come off of mute, feel free to speak your question. And Ben's encouraging questions along the way, so you don't have to wait till the end. And I'll get more into that in a second. We just want to remind everyone, PNAP's a welcoming community, and we're really glad that you're all here today. We probably don't need to mention be nice, because we are all very nice here in PNAP, but we're glad you're here. And with that, I want to introduce Ben Staton. Ben, if you haven't met him yet, you're going to meet him today, and I hope you know that he's a resource available to everyone. He is a quantitative fisheries scientist at Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. He's been involved in quite a lot of work over the years. We're always happy when Ben participates in PNAP work. He was one of the key presenters at our emerging technology information sessions last winter, where he talked about this work or related work about using GitHub. So today he's going to go into more depth, and he's going to have a live demo. Ben has a 90-minute slot, and then we have 30 minutes for office hours to follow. So as I mentioned already, Ben is willing to take your questions or comments throughout. So you don't have to save them for the whole hour or 90 minutes of his presentation. Feel free to raise your hand. Amy and I will monitor that. And if we really miss your hand, turn your camera on for a second so we notice. But we should be able to catch that and help Ben. If you want to type your comment into the chat box, Ben, we can help read that to you if you, I don't know how many screens you've got juggling there. So with that, are there any, did I miss anything, Amy? Okay, I think we've gotten through our introductions. I see our numbers are up over 50 people. So moving on, oops, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing and let Ben take the screen. Thank you so much, Ben. We're really glad to have you here. Take it away.
Great. I'm very happy to be here. Jen, I appreciate that introduction. So yeah, I think I'll just dive right in. So this is going to be kind of a live tutorial, very, play it as we go. Should mention too, this is the first time I've sort of done a live tutorial on this kind of content. So hopefully it's not too rocky. I have kind of a script that I'm planning to stick to, but if you guys ask me to go off script, no promises that it'll go smoothly. I just have a handful of slides. I want to kind of go over just some very basic introductory information. Hopefully, folks, if you're not familiar with GitHub and what it's all about, hopefully you had a chance to view that ETIS webinar that we did back in January that's on YouTube. That gives kind of a broad introduction about just what GitHub is, why people might want to use it, and a variety of the different terminology that I'm going to be using today. But as far as just getting started, these are sort of some of the steps that you'll need to do before what I show today. So I've already created a GitHub account. I've had that for years. If you don't have one already, that's something that you would need to do beforehand, before you hit the ground running with anything that I'm showing today. Same thing, I'm going to be using a software called GitHub Desktop. That's something that you'll have to install on your computer. Obviously, I've already done that. I won't show how to do it, but these slides are available on the PNAMP website. You can click these links and they'll take you right to where you need to go. There is another way to use GitHub or Git locally on your computer without this software I'm going to show, GitHub Desktop. You can do many of the things I'll show through RStudio. If you're an R programmer, I'm going to use some R today. And I'll use RStudio, but I'm not really going to show how to use the Git integration with RStudio. It's not something I use. And so if I was to show it, it probably wouldn't go very well. But just so you know, I'm going to use GitHub Desktop. I like it. I think it's clean. But if you don't want to be switching programs all the time and you just work in RStudio, that's something to keep in mind, that you can skirt around that. And that's something to look into if you're interested. Something that will also be really useful for you is a working knowledge of Markdown syntax. Pretty common. Most people should have a general idea of that, especially given the popularity of things like R Markdown. But if you don't know, I'll go over some of it today, just show some basic examples. But there's more info about everything you need to know for using Markdown syntax. And then beginner's knowledge of terminology. Here's that link to that GitHub presentation for ETIS that I talked about earlier. There's a lot of stuff in there. So, of course, there's, with how popular something like GitHub is, there's a huge amount of resources out there online. The idea behind what we're going to do today is just to give you kind of a very crash course of what it looks like to sort of interact with GitHub for a very basic toy problem. But if you want to dive deeper, this is a great ebook called Happy Git with R. Huge amount of information if you want to teach yourself. Of course, GitHub is a large organization that's been going for a long time. They've got a huge amount of help documentation for both just GitHub in general, the sort of online interface, as well as GitHub Desktop has its own help documentation. So, if you run into road bumps, those links should direct you to the sort of official guidance on how to get around them. And then I'll also go over two sort of example well-established GitHub repositories already, just to sort of show what they look like and how to interact with them. I'll show one of mine, and then I'll also just briefly pull up one of Kevin's that he's going to be going through in much more detail next week. And then, of course, don't undersell your own curiosity as a resource. Once you start diving in on this on your own, you're going to discover all kinds of stuff that I won't have time to cover today. But you'll say, oh, that's cool that it works that way. It's pretty intuitive once you get past the initial roadblocks of just what on earth am I doing here. So that's the most of the introductory resources. I have this other slide. This was a sort of a critical slide from the ETIS presentation. I don't think I'm going to go through it really line by line, but I just want to highlight that we're going to do all of the actions and talk about all the terms sort of in real time. Items certainly 1 through 12. I don't think we're going to do a formal pull request. If I have way more time than what I think, we might end up getting to that, but that would definitely be a little bit off script from what I have planned. But just to say, if you were viewing that presentation and any of these terms were sort of, what on earth is he talking about? Hopefully today's presentation, doing this live demo, is going to give some clarity on what they are. So I think maybe this might be our first initial stop to say, are there any questions before we dive into the sort of live demo portion of this webinar? This is the kind of thing I'll probably sit and wait for 5 or so seconds after I ask if there's any questions.
Yeah, and I'll take a peek. I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any hands raised. Okay. So I'll just sort of we can banter for a moment while we pause, but I think, and Amy just dropped this link to the slides again. If you came in late, you might have missed that. We're still seeing the numbers go up a little bit, Ben, on participation. So
Great.
I think we're ready to go.
Okay. All right. So during this presentation, I'm going to be sharing this entire screen. I'm going to have windows flying around like crazy. But I think the first place to start is to pull up this GitHub desktop application and just kind of show what it is, do a little bit of navigation within it. So when you first get started, yours will look a little bit different than mine because I have a whole list of repositories I've already created. Remember, a repository is sort of like a project. It's a code project that's sort of devoted to one specific analysis or project. You can organize these how you like, but I'm going to use the term repository, repo. Keep in mind, that's just a devoted place where you're doing your work. It can be viewed as a folder on your computer, as we'll talk about. But I have one pulled up here. This is one of the repositories I've been working on. Just finished it recently, actually. So you can just see this sort of interface, very familiar, sort of GUI type, drop-down menus that people should be familiar with. And then just to show on this particular repository, so when we make changes to the files, they'll show up here. And then you can look at the history of the changes that you've made in the past. And so these are all remember the terminology commit. So commit is like a designated change that you're making to the repository. You've made some changes in the files, you've saved them, they show up as a changed file in your repository. Committing says, okay, I want to accept that change. Every change that I make from here on out is going to be made on top of that change. So this shows the entire history of all the commits I've made. One really nice thing is when I come back to this project 2 years later, say it wasn't finished, I could click on, and look and see, oh, this is truly the last thing that I did in the repository. I can see, oh, the last 5 things I did. So that's a really, really useful feature. So yeah, that's sort of where you can see the history of the changes you've made. If we had multiple branches, we'll talk about branches some more. There would be the whole list of those right here. But I think that's kind of everything very introductory to talk about GitHub Desktop. I think I'll just get started with the demo of sort of this toy example. So keep in mind, it's going to be very basic. There's not going to be any groundbreaking modeling work that's going to be shown here. No super hot code or anything. This is just, very introductory for how GitHub works. It's also not really intended to be a follow along exercise. I want you to be following along, stay with me, but I'm not really expecting you as the participant to be clicking on the same things I'm clicking on and typing in the same code I'm typing. That's not how I really designed this. The other thing to note is that I mentioned, I think in the ETS presentation, that GitHub is tailored to be very collaborative. So if you work with a team of collaborators, you can all be contributing code to the same project. What I'm going to be showing today is sort of the single user workflow. Maybe talk a little bit about where other users can plug in. But keep that in mind. This is kind of you working as a lone gun on a project. That's kind of the main workflow I'm going to be showing. And then, of course, as I'm going through stuff, if I say something confusing, anything, definitely interrupt me and ask questions as we go along. So, I'm going to go and create a new repository. So this is starting from scratch. We'll click New Repository here. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it PNAMP 2025 Demo. And this is going to become a folder on your computer. So whatever you name this here, that's going to be the folder name on your computer. Description, this is optional. You can put something in there if you want. I'm going to leave it blank for now. And then you need to pick where on your computer you want this to be stored. So I'm going to choose here. I have a place where all of this stuff for this workshop is going, so I'm going to put it here. Doesn't really matter where on your computer you put it, just make sure you know where it is. I'm going to click this box to initialize it with the README. We're going to skip these two for now. We'll talk about git ignore later on. So I'll create the repository. Excuse me. Okay, so I created the repository. It automatically switched to that repository. And then I also want to show that this is a folder now on your computer. So the easiest way to navigate to that location is you can always click this button, Show in Explorer. So here's the parent folder that it's in. That's what I called the repository. And there we are. So it's empty for now. There's this sort of hidden file. That's just part of every GitHub repository. You'll never need to edit that file. Here's that README. This is a blank file for now. We'll edit it later on. So nothing useful in there yet. Okay. But going to the commit history, you'll see there's one commit already, the one that sort of initializes the repository. That's sort of obligatory. So I'm going to go and start making changes. So I'm going to open up RStudio and I'll create a new art script and I'm going to save this file and I'll put it in that repository. I'll just call it demo code. So totally blank file for now, but it is in the repository. And you can see that here. File's in there. And it shows that it's in there. You could commit it. It says the file is empty though, so there's really no point in committing that file yet. I have some basic code already written that I'm just going to copy and paste into there. So this is going to be kind of some dummy code that we're just going to work through as a toy example. Excuse me. So notice I haven't saved the file yet. Those changes don't show up yet in GitHub Desktop. It's not until I save those that now it shows, okay, this file is in there and it's changed. So these are all the changes to that file. I can unclick it and say, don't add those changes yet. Excuse me. Kind of a dry, scratchy throat today. But I can also select specific lines out of that file. Say I just wanted to commit those lines and not the other ones yet, I could do that. But for now, I'm going to commit the whole file. So I'll just say, so every time that you want to make a commit, you have to make a commit message. And that commit message is really important. It will describe what the changes that you made there are. If you want to add more details, you can always type more stuff. This is optional. Boy, sorry guys, that's embarrassing, especially that it's happening this early. But hang with me. So commit message totally required. I can't commit this without, it actually includes a default. So there is a default message. Usually you want to be a little bit more descriptive than that. So I'm going to undo that commit and put in my own message. So I'll commit that. So we've added that file. It shows up in the commit history. That's the most recent one. Okay. So next thing I want to show is maybe I'll just make some comments to this code. It's just code right now. There's nothing that describes what it does. So I'll just type in some stuff here. So what this code does is it simulates some data from a linear regression and then fits that regression and then plots the output. So that's all the code does. So I'll just say, set parameters. This section is simulate the data. This is fit the model. This is and this is plot. Okay. And we can run the code to see what it does.
Are you out there, Ben? Looks like you're frozen. Hang tight, folks. We might have lost Ben. I'm sure he'll be back. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yes, I
There he
can.
is. You're back. All right.
That was weird. I
Just
could hear you that
cough
whole
so
time,
hard
John.
you muted yourself. Oh, you could hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I could hear
ahead,
you.
Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, really basic code just to demonstrate some changes to a file. Okay. So all I did there was just add in some comments that describe what each section is doing. So I'll go and open up GitHub again. It shows that these are additions. The plus sign in the green denotes that's a line that wasn't there before that you added. So I'll just commit that and say add comments to code. And the shortcut that I'm doing there to commit is, I think, Control Enter. You could also come down and click the commit button. Okay. Next thing, I'm going to keep on editing this code file. I'm going to add a little bit of code to save this plot as an image in our repository. Okay. So what this will do when I run this bit of code, instead of putting it down here in our studio, It's instead going to create a PNG device file in our working directory, which I should make sure to set. And it'll dump the plot in there, and then we close that file. So that's the change that I just made. And we can now see that plot is now in our repository. Now, if we go over to GitHub, I'll make sure to save the code. Excuse me. So by default, every change that you make is going to be added to your change list. If you don't want to add a file to the commit yet, just uncheck them. So I want to commit the code. But I don't really, sometimes there's going to be files in your repository that you don't want to track with Git. Sometimes, because I'm making up random numbers, for example, in this code, every time I rerun this code, this plot's going to change. And I might not want to have to commit that and track that every single time. So what I'm going to talk about now is what's called the git ignore file. I'm going to add this file to git ignore and say, I don't want to track changes in it. So there's an easy way to do that actually here. If you right click, you can say, ignore that file or ignore all PNG files. So I'm actually going to do that. So what it did is it created a new file in our repository called git ignore. And this is what it looks like. This is the only thing that's in there now is an asterisk and .png. So this says any file, regardless of what it's called, if it has a PNG file extension, don't track that in Git. So, but I do have to commit that change to git ignore. So, okay. So I'll commit that. So now I can run this over and over again. And even though that plot file is changing every time, GitHub doesn't know about it. It's not showing up in the add list. So that's an important concept, the git ignore. Okay. Okay. I might pause here really quickly and just go blow my nose. Sorry, guys.
All right, well, back to Jen, filling in the moment here. I think Ben is an allergy sufferer, and the spring plants are just going berserk in Portland. So he just stepped away for a second. So, and I'll remind you, if you didn't hear us earlier, that Ben is willing to entertain any questions along the way. You do not have to wait to the conclusion of his talk. So feel free to raise your hand or throw a question in the chat if you would like him to go into a little sidebar or clarify something as he's going. And he did share a few slides at the start, which we've dropped in the chat. And they're also on pnep.org, so stay with the event. All right, I think
Okay.
Ben is back.
I'm back.
Commercial break over.
Yep. Sorry, we had to take a quick break from our sponsors. Yeah, I think now hopefully there might be some questions.
Yes, looks like Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Just a quick question regarding your GitHub desktop, because I know Git on at least Windows, it's basically just creates a file in a folder that maintains the changes, but also the git ignore. So what happens when you move that folder someplace else? Does GitHub for desktop track where that goes,
Right.
so you don't lose it?
Very good question. No. So if I'm in GitHub desktop and I move the file location, the folder location, this is going to pull up and say, can't find files, or there'll be some message. To fix that problem, you can go and say add local repository. So this, you still have that repository on your computer. You just need to redirect GitHub desktop to know where it is again. Yep. Very good question. And similarly, if someone else sends you a GitHub repo, it has everything for Git. It's just not linked to your GUI yet. That's also how you would include it. Yep. Other questions?
Not seeing anything in the chat or any more hands raised.
Does that make sense, Brian? I'm happy
Wait,
I could demo what it looks like.
Just one follow-up, because I saw that come up on your drop down. When you clone from a repository, if you click on that, does that let you enter in something from GitHub?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm guessing, I don't know if I've actually ever clicked this, but yeah, so you could, it's pulling up my list of repositories that are on GitHub right now. This would be one. You could also probably,
Well, you click URL, I think.
yeah, you could use someone else's probably, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And we'll show how to do that from GitHub Online too. Okay. Next up, if there's no further questions, is to show sort of my favorite feature of using GitHub, and that's the concept of branching. So I'm actually, hopefully this will work where I can show these side by side. So branching is very central to the concept of using GitHub. Say, for example, I have a change that I want to make to the repo. It could be a pretty big change. It could be a small change. Regardless of what it is, I don't know if I want to keep it or not. It's something that I'm going to trial it out. And if I like it, I can keep it. If I don't like it, I can totally toss it out. So let's create a new branch. A branch is just going to be a duplicate. Until I make changes on that branch, it's going to just be a one-to-one duplicate of what's called the main branch. So I'm going to make a branch called add plot legend. So you might have noticed this plot has got some stuff on it, but there's nothing that says what the different lines mean. And so we might want a legend. So I'm going to create that as a new branch. Create branch. Okay. So first off, before I make any I either behind, there's no commits on main that don't exist on this branch, and this branch is not ahead. There's no commits on this branch that don't live on main. So that just goes to show it's a one-to-one copy. But this is the branch I'm on now. I'm going to make some changes to this code. I'll just write some code that's going to add a legend. Let's put it in the top left. So what are the labels going to be? There's sort of three things on the plot we should show. One is the main fitted line. The other is 95% intervals. And the other is the true line. Main thing that differentiates them is the color. So the fitted line is black. The CIs are this gray color, and the truth is in that royal blue. The other thing that's different is the thickness of the lines. So that one is twice as thick. This is single thickness. That one's also twice as thick. And then also line type. I'll just pull up the plot so we can see these things that I'm talking about. The fitted line is a solid line. The intervals are a dashed line, and the true line is also a solid line. And okay. Okay. So we've just changed the code, added that onto the plot. We see over here, those changes show up in the code changes. One thing, if I go to change branches at this stage, there are changes that are living on this branch, but they're not committed yet. If I go to change branches, it's going to say, you have changes on this branch. What do you want to do with them? You could leave them where they're at and sort of what's called stashing them. They won't be committed, but they'll just sort of live in that branch for temporarily for now. Or you could bring them over to main. I want to do the stashing option. I don't know if I'm going to like this change. It's not going to live on main yet. I want to keep it on the add plot legend branch. So now I can switch branches. And if I come back over to here, because I'm on the main branch, that code that I just added doesn't show up. It's not on that branch yet. But keep in mind, this is all happening within the same repository. So I don't have duplicate versions of this file. The only sense that they're duplicate versions is that they're duplicate branches. I don't have demo code version 1, demo code version 2, duplicate files. The only way I can access that other version is to switch branches. So I'll go back and switch here. Shows there's no changes, but there is these stash changes. So I'm going to restore those. Bring them back, switch over here. There it is back again. So this time I'm going to commit that change. Okay. So now if I look at the history, it exists on this branch. If I select a branch to compare, we see this. So saying that the current branch that I'm on is not behind main, but it has one commit that does not exist on main yet. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Normally, you'll have multiple commits on a branch. I'm just going to show this one commit. I'm not going to make any other changes. But what I want to do now is say, on this plot, that looks pretty good. I want to keep that. That's going to be an important feature of this repo going forward. So let's merge it in with the main branch. So the way to do one of these merges, to say anything that's on my current branch, move it over to main. I don't want to be working on this other separate branch anymore. I'm ready to move on to some other topic. But before I move on, I want to make sure that any changes that I make in the future go on top of this change that I just made. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch over to main. And again, that change does not yet live there. And I'll say, switch it, select a branch to compare, select the branch that you're talking about merging. You can click this button, say create a merge commit. So this will take, it says exactly what it's going to do. It'll merge that one commit from this other branch into main. So we'll click that. It says it was successfully done. That commit now lives. I'm on main. That commit is now shown in the main history. Okay. And now what I can do, because these two things are now identical, I can go and delete this branch. And it says, delete that, action cannot be undone. So before doing it, you don't want to keep a bunch of the branches that you've already merged in. So because there's just no point. You're going to be advancing main beyond where this is. If I didn't delete this, this would be sort of locked in time. It won't have any of the commits that I make onto main going forward. So I'll delete it. Okay. So that other branch no longer is shown in my repository. So that's that's the main workflow. What I just showed, create a repository, add some files, make changes to those files, commit them. When you're happy with the repository as it is, but you think you have some changes to make, create a new branch, make the changes on that branch. Once you're done with that task, merge it in with main, delete that branch, and move forward. So that's kind of the sort of rinse and repeat workflow.
Okay, Ben, we have a question from
Yeah.
the chat. While you're
Yeah, I was
talking.
going to say this could be a good chance to ask any questions before moving on to the next section.
So from Megan, we have, she says, I may have missed this, but what is the utility for working in a branch rather than just in the main as a newcomer to GitHub?
Yep. Yeah. So main is kind of, this is your, if you were to share it with the collaborator and say, this is the most current, best version of my repository right now, that's what main is. Anything that's sort of exploratory or sort of in development, not quite ready for the main stage yet, that's what you would be having in your separate branches. The advantage of having both is that, say you want to try something new, you can do that in a branch, a duplicate of your repository, without ever messing up the changes that are already in main. So any changes you make in that branch are independent of main until you merge them back in. So, you could just have this sort of sandbox where you're trying out new things without having to worry about messing up all of your great work that's already done. Hopefully that makes sense.
Megan says, yep, that makes sense. Any other questions out there? Okay. Carry on, Ben.
Okay. So just do want to highlight quickly, notice the small nature of the commits I'm making. This is a really simple repository, so there's only this one file, but each commit I'm making is really just a very incremental change to the code. I'm not changing like hundreds of lines at a time that all accomplish different things and then saying commit everything all at once. I'm doing it sort of step by step. And that's the recommended way to do it, so that you can see this list of progressions that have been made. And say, you can go back to any point in here and say, create a branch from any point in your history. So, say, if I made a bunch of changes, I can go back at any point in the history and say, let's create a branch from this commit. And from that point in the history, it's going to ignore everything forward of that, but we'll branch off and make changes there. So just the idea is to have the commits be small additions to the repository. Branches are kind of similar in that they should accomplish a single broad goal, but there might be multiple commits that are sort of small steps along the way to achieve that broader goal. Yeah. So for example, I could have had a branch that was, instead of just add a legend, it could have been, perfect this graph. And in perfecting it, I might, there's a whole host of different things I can make this graph be a little bit more appealing. Legend was an important part of it. Could improve the axis titles, could, change the margins, all those sorts of things. Those would have been multiple commits on that branch that all accomplish this same broad goal of sort of perfecting that graph. And then once the graph is perfect, then I would merge that branch in. So that's kind of the philosophy of behind commits and branches. Yeah. So the next part of this tutorial is going to be kind of everything we've done so far has been what's called locally. It's all just changes that exist on my hard drive. I have not done anything with GitHub online. So that's where this next step is going to come in. So I'm going to come over here and click Publish Repository. And that's going to add it to my GitHub account online. So it's going to keep the same name. I'm not going to add a description still. And for now, I'm going to keep this code private. So if someone else goes to my GitHub account, they won't see this in my list of repositories for now. So I'll click Publish. Okay, so there's no local repositories or changes to the repository, but now I have this new button down here, say View on GitHub. So I'll click that. Okay, so this is what the repository looks like online. And this is what's called the remote. So now there's two copies of the repository. There's the remote copy and there's my local copy. And much of your work is going to be, typically I like to work locally and then do what's called push. I'll push those changes that I make locally on my computer up to the remote repository. This can be kind of viewed as like a backup. They say you're not supposed to use GitHub as a formal backup option because it could theoretically go down. But it's also sort of like the central location for this. If anybody else wants to see it, this is where they'll go. They won't be able to have access to my specific hard drive unless they're sitting right next to me. So that's the remote. And you can see here it's listed as a private repository. No one else can see this for now. The interface is a little bit different than GitHub Desktop. If I wanted to look at different branches that exist in the repo, I would do it here. This says there's only one branch, and that's the main branch. But first thing I want to show is what's called the issue tracker. So people use this as a different in different ways. For big research projects, I kind of use it as like a lab notebook where I document things that I'm working on, I'm going to be working on, road bumps I've hit. I can get feedback from collaborators in the issue. So I'm going to create one. If I had other issues in here, they would show, but I'm going to create a new issue. So it needs a title. I'm going to say something about how my README file needs work. And then this is actually not required, but this is where you would add details about, what's going on with this issue. There's some problem in your repository, or there's some topic that you want to talk more about. You can add some details here. And this is where the use of markdown language becomes really useful. So you can use regular text, or you can use like make it italic, for example. And the way to do that would be to wrap this with these underscores. And at any time, if you want to see your markdown be rendered, you can click preview. So that's not publishing the repository or publishing the issue yet. That's just you're taking a look at the changes you've made. The other really nice thing that you can do in these is put screenshots. So this comes up a lot. Like if I have a version of a plot, I want to show some output and talk about it. Hey, something looks wonky. I can do that and say this needs improvement. So I'll just open this up and take a screenshot of this code. And I can paste that in. So it's on my clipboard right now. If I just paste that, go over to preview, it's included. So that's really useful. But basically, the README so that's I'm kind of creating this issue that says there's something in my repository that needs work, and I'm going to create it. So then this is the sort of comment thread on that issue. So I could type more to add some more details. I can edit the original. Or if I had collaborators on this project, they could post comments and add their thoughts. But this is the sort of ID for this issue. So it's hashtag #1. It's the first one that I've made. And I can reference that many other places in the repository. So for example, I'm going to go now working back locally again. I'm going to make some changes to this README file. Say if I want to make this bold, I would use 2 asterisks on either side. And that'll show up as being bold when it's rendered. Another thing that's really nice to be able to do is is to format something as it's going to show.
Ben. I think last time you could hear me, but we can't hear you. So I'm just breaking in. I think I'm not the only one. Back to us, Ben. Can other people hear me? This is Jen. Maybe someone turn their camera on or put something in the chat. Okay.
Yes.
So Monica hears me. Oh, you're back. I don't know. Yeah, maybe if it's persistent, maybe your camera is eating up too much of your bandwidth there, Ben. It's nice seeing you, but
That's possible.
yeah. All right. Back
Okay,
at
so
it.
you can
Sorry.
see me waving to you and my mouth moving. You just can't hear it.
I can see you talking. I could not see you waving. You were completely
Okay.
frozen. And now you're fairly grainy on the image. So anyway,
That's
I
frustrating.
like seeing you as a nice long lecture like this. It's nice to see the professor at the head of the class.
Yeah.
But if we can't hear you, then it's tough. So, all right.
Right.
Back
So
at it.
yeah, I'm definitely open to shutting off my camera if we think that that would fix the audio issue. We'll see if it keeps going. I don't
Okay.
usually have internet problems here.
Well, I'll break in since you seem to be able to hear me. I'll break in quicker next time. All right.
Okay.
Sorry for the interruption,
So-
everybody.
No problem. So so you didn't hear kind of any of the commentary I made on this?
I am not.
It's not a
Amy's
big deal.
saying we heard you say something about a code comment, and then we lost you.
Okay. So all I'm doing here is I'm editing this README file, putting in some content that is going to sort of correspond to this issue. Say I've made this issue on GitHub that says this README needs improvement, and I'm just going to go dump some content in there for now. Sort of very placeholder, nothing very useful, but just to sort of demonstrate some of the things you can do. Okay, so I've edited that file, and I'll go back into GitHub desktop now. It shows that I've made those changes to README. I'll click update README, and I'll commit them. Oh, there is one other thing I wanted to do. So when I'm making this commit, it's tied to a specific issue. I'm doing this commit specifically because of this issue exists. So I can reference that issue here and say, and that will link it on GitHub. So I'll commit that. Okay, so that change now just lives locally. It's not on GitHub yet. My remote repository, it's only on my local repository. Now this shows the option to push it. It says there's one commit that could be pushed to the remote. So I'll do that. Okay, so now I'll go back to GitHub online. Okay, so here are the changes it shows in the README file. This is what I was talking about. This is what those code fences do. If I look at just the plain version, this is the markdown syntax. There's the rendered version. Okay. Okay. Now to go back to that issue, because I included that number one in that description, it shows here that, hey, you added a commit that references this issue. So that's generally good to do because you can at any time go and click here and see, okay, this is the commit that is about that issue. And let's say it's done. I'm done with the improvements that I want to make, I can go and close the issue, because otherwise it's going to show as open. And when I go to my list, it's going to say, I'm going to see it as something that needs to be addressed. Once I've addressed it, I'll close it. Okay. Now, when I go to my issue list, there are none that are showing they're open, but there's one. You can go back and see what have you closed. Okay. So next thing I want to show is, so you don't have to work completely locally. You can make changes on GitHub online too. So let's open up this code file and say edit it. And what do I want to do? I could make the points be red on the plot instead of just they're black. And let's make them be filled in points instead of hollow points. So I'm changing the code file. I'm not in R right now. I'm not in RStudio. I'm on GitHub Online. So now,
Okay, Ben, you froze again. Maybe your internet is a little less stable than when we started. Maybe we should try killing the camera for a little bit. We can turn it back on later when we're doing the discussion.
but that's
Yeah,
the best option.
I think we should try that for
All
now
right.
and see how it goes.
Okay. So I was frozen, but could you hear the audio?
No, seems like we lose
Okay.
everything, which is pretty hard to follow there.
Yeah.
So I
well,
think the last thing I
so-
heard you say, I'm not in RStudio, I'm in GitHub Online. You're making a distinction.
Okay. Yep. At least maybe we should be grateful that it's not kicking me out of the meeting when that's happening.
We are grateful,
So,
yes.
I mean, that tells me that I'm not losing connection, just that my bandwidth isn't as good as it should be. Pretty disruptive. I'm sorry about that, folks. All I did, I just made some very small changes to the code file. But I need to commit them. So this is sort of like saving them. I'm going to commit to the change that I made. So this is the basic default commit message, very basic, not very descriptive. So I'm going to say make points red and filled in. And then you have an option here. Do you want to make that commit directly to the main branch, or do you want to start it on a new branch? I'm going to just make it to the main branch. So I'll commit that change. The other thing I should say is here you can see this is the commit message of the last commit that changed that file. And it shows how long ago it was done. But now my two repositories are out of sync. There's a commit that lives on the remote that is not yet on my local. To remedy that, I'll go into GitHub Desktop, which is where I'm working locally, and I'll click this button that says Fetch. That basically checks to see if these things are in sync. That happens kind of automatically. You won't always have to click that button. I think it fetches every so often, but in this case, I know they're out of sync, so I'll fetch, and that'll tell me. Now it says pull. There's one commit that needs to be pulled down from the remote to your local so that these things are now in sync again. So I'll click and pull. Now it shows that commit is now in the history. I should have showed the history on here locally before pulling. It would have just showed this update README as being the most recent commit. But now if I go and open that code file, we see that change. That's the new addition that I made. Doesn't show up in the plot file yet because I haven't ran the code. But if I go and run the code now, there they are. Okay, so that's the most of what I want to show for this section. Last thing I want to show quickly is I've got a private repository now. Say I'm happy with what it looks like. I'm ready to show this to the community. I'm ready to get feedback from collaborators, have them add their own stuff. So I want to make this be a public repository. So to do that, you go up to settings. Could be something called access. Or no, it's just in this main section here. It's in this thing called danger zone. So this is sort of stuff that is really changing the fundamental nature of your repository. If it's currently private, I want to change it to be public. It's going to ask you, make sure you want to do it. So it says it'll be visible to everyone. People can fork it. That is, forking means I want to take someone's repository and make my own copy that shows up in my account. I don't really use forking workflows, but that's a different way to collaborate with GitHub. The way I like to collaborate with GitHub is to add a collaborator onto this repository. So there's just one remote central version of the repository, and people make changes to it, and I can either accept them or reject them as I see fit. So you can look at, when you get into the collaboration aspect, you can look at different workflows. Some people use forking workflows. Other people use sort of the central repository workflow. I don't really know what that one means. Changes are published as activity. So when I make changes, if someone's following this repository, they'll see the changes I make. They might get notified of them. Everything will be visible to everyone, basically. So I've read and understand them. Once again, it's asking me, do you want to make it public? I got to confirm access. So I'm going to get probably a push notification to my device that says, do you actually want to do this? So yep, I got a two-factor authentication to push to my phone, where I have to enter in these digits, and I just did that. Okay. So now it's public. So now someone on your own computer, if you want to, you can navigate to that URL and see the exact same thing I'm seeing. For what it's worth, when this demo is done with, I'm probably going to delete this repository. I have a few repositories already. I don't really want this clogging up, and there's nothing really all that worthwhile in here anyways. Certainly nothing that would be useful for folks after the workshop or after the webinar is done with. So just so everyone knows, after today, this isn't really going to exist anymore. Okay, so that would be sort of my next point where I can pause for questions and see. Hopefully everybody has been hearing what I've been saying. My audio, I hope, has been clear. Are there any questions about sort of what I just showed with working with the remote repository? Pushing, pulling, making sure things are in sync. the issue tracker, all those kinds of things. Questions about that content?
See a few thumbs up. Any questions out there? You can come off mute if you want and ask your question, or you could type it in the chat. Occasionally, we have people who aren't able to type in the chat. And covered a bunch of stuff. Very cool to show how to make it public. The danger zone is a good way to get your attention. I like that. Any questions, anybody? All right, going once, going twice. That audio's been great. Yep, nice and
Great.
stable. But I'm not seeing any questions, Ben. So I guess proceed.
Okay. So the last and final part, or I guess the third and final part that I want to go through is just sort of navigating perhaps other people's repositories. You know, you want to find someone else's code, get their code on your computer, or just explore the work they've been doing. That's kind of what I want to talk about now. So I have one of my repositories. I've called it Yakima RRS, and this is a relative reproductive success study that we recently had published for spring Chinook in the Upper Yakima Basin. It's a bunch of GLMs. Each of these subdirectories is sort of a specific GLM analysis targeted at answering a specific question about how do fish in this group differ in their reproductive success than fish in this other group. And so that's the repository structure. I have a much prettier README file because people are actually seeing this one. I have links here where people can go to the article. I've archived this code so that it's there forever. Even if my GitHub is deleted for some reason, the people will still be able to access the code and the data. That's an important aspect when doing these things that are tied to manuscripts. I've got a section that talks about what each subdirectory is doing. I've got info about the data file, sort of metadata that describes what each variable in the data file contains. If someone wants to reproduce the analyses that we have in the manuscript, I give instructions about how they can do that. Give details about my computer and how long it should run on their computer if they're doing it on theirs. And then some info about dependencies. So stuff, these are our packages that the analysis depends on. I've got this table that says this is what that package does, the version that we used in the manuscript, and then they can click on these links to get more info about that package. And then finally, stuff about my computer and the just the versions of everything that I used when running that analysis. So that's kind of what a more complete README might look like. Give info about, this is, I just say explicitly, this repository is tied to this manuscript. Again, only the one main branch. Issues, I don't think I created that many issues for this. Yeah, there was one that I closed. Oh, I found a bug. When I was going through reviewing things, I found this bug. There's two legend categories that are the same that needed to be updated. And so I made the change. I referenced it so I can go and look exactly. Okay, there's the exact change. What file was it? What line number was it? And probably the date is shown in here somewhere yet, back in September. So I just had a basic typo in the code that I just needed to fix. And so you just an example of how you can tie all this together and see, okay, this was the problem. I included a screenshot that displayed what the problem was. And then by referencing that issue when I made the commit, now I can see, okay, this is the exact change that I made to fix that exact problem. So say you're not me and you want to have access to this code, have it on your computer. I already have this repository on my computer somewhere, but I'm going to pretend as though I don't. I'm someone else, and I want to have all these files, this exact structure added to my computer. So I would do. You have a couple options here. If you think that there's any possibility that you'll want to contribute changes and ask if that repository owner wants to include those changes in their repo, I would probably clone it and open it in your GitHub desktop. That will tie your version of the repo to theirs, to that remote repo, and then you can make changes, submit them, and they'll be able to accept or reject them. But for now, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to just click download zip. So if I go to my download section, I now have this zip file that has everything. So now I have now this won't stay current if that person makes changes to their remote repo, they won't display here. That's the other advantage of cloning it and adding it to your GitHub desktop. It'll notify you and say, hey, there's changes on the remote you need to pull down for you to stay current. What I just did there now is I downloaded everything in their current form, and they'll stay that way. So, yeah. Another thing, if you don't want to have all the files on your computer, you just want to look at a file. Say, for example, let's look at one of these scripts that I used to fit the models. So you can just go and look at the code that's in any of these files. It's including all this syntax highlighting because it knows it's an R language file. So it's not just all white text or something. It includes the actual sort of syntax highlighting. If one useful thing that sometimes comes up is less about these script files, but if it was, say, a CSV file or something like that, I could do what I'm about to do to get that content onto my computer. So I'll just copy this link. This is called raw. So what I did there was I clicked this raw button. So that removes any formatting that doesn't exist in the file itself. I'll just copy this URL and I'll go into R in a new script here, and I'll just type. So I'm going to read the lines that are in that file, and then let's do this. So read lines just reads them in, basically. Each line is a different element in this big vector. I want to print them separated by new lines. So if someone has a CSV or other kind of data file on their computer or on their remote repository, you could do that same workflow, copy that raw link and type it in read.csv. That'll read the contents of that file and format it as a data frame, and you can work from there without ever having to download that file, put it somewhere on your computer. Yeah, and that has the advantages of if they ever change that CSV file in their repo, as long as you're linking to that one that's in their remote, you'll get the most current version. So that's something that's pretty useful. Kind of last thing I want to show with navigating remote repositories is I'll just show what the repository that Kevin's going to talk about next week. So define repositories. You see what I just did. I know the name of his user account and I know the name of the package. So, or the name of the repository. So I just typed it in like that, and Google finds that it's a GitHub repository. So this, unlike the other repository I showed, is an actual R package. This contains the source code that says, you know, these are basic files that are going to go into an R package once it gets built. GitHub is really, really useful for this. If you have an R package that you've been working on, you build it, but you don't want to submit it to CRAN for whatever reason, you know, maybe it's not going to see that broad of usership. Maybe just a handful of people might want to use it. You don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of having it be approved by CRAN and hosted there permanently. You can just post it to your GitHub account, all the files for that package, and then someone will be able to install it onto their computer and their R session. So I'll show quickly how to install that package. I'm sure Kevin will show this next week, but because he set this up as an R package on GitHub, you can use this package called remotes. The function is called install GitHub. First, you type the username and then the repo. You just hit enter. That'll go through, download all the files for the package, build it, and you'll just be able to use it. You usually get prompted, do you want to update all these packages? I don't want to do that right now. So I'm just going to click enter to do an empty line and skip the updates. Maybe that would cause problems if I'm actually using it. Probably not, though. Okay, so now you should be able to see I can use it. Pit cleaner. I can use the packages or the functions that are in that package. I don't know what this is. Probably a problem with my computer. But I think that's pretty much everything I want to show with navigating other people's repositories. Yeah, I think that pretty much concludes everything I wanted to show for this webinar, and I'm about right at time, 6 minutes early. So I think
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see Kevin's comments. Glad that Pit Cleaner install worked. It's very cool to see you guys stitch these weeks together. I like that. Denise has a question, but first I want to say thank you, Ben. But we're not done yet. Don't slip away. Denise Kelsey is asking, there is always issues with applications, what are a couple of issues about GitHub desktops that drives you crazy, and what are your workarounds?
Well, one thing that I don't necessarily like about GitHub Desktop is there's no way to work with issues in it. If I want to create an issue, edit the issue, post comments to that issue, I have to go online. I have to go to the online version of the repository, make the issues here, and then do my work locally. So it does involve a fair amount of task switching. That's something that you just sort of get used to working with GitHub. You have multiple tabs open, you're switching between R. If you have data files, maybe an Excel window. So it can, it adds this layer into your work of, I'm making changes into the code. You have to think, is this a good stopping point where I want to say, yeah, let's commit these changes. I like the way they are. That's kind of just GitHub in general. Something to get used to is this sort of additional layer to your work of just committing, when to commit. Yeah. But as far as issues I've had with GitHub Desktop, it's pretty clean. and it's currently improving. This filter bar never used to be there. I don't really know what it does, but it's they're continuing to add features. So it's not something that, if there is a problem with it, a major problem, it's almost certainly being worked on. But I have yet to find something major. Good question, though.
Great question. Thanks, Denise. And thanks, Ben. Looking at the chat. Any other questions? Anyone want to come off mute and ask your question yourself? Don't hear me butcher it and say things like comma. Just proving I'm really a person here. Any other questions? It was an awful lot. I think the pace was great, Ben. I am a big fan of GitHub, but I'm more of a observer than user, so it was really very cool to see you go through it. I really appreciated it. And now
I'm going to try flipping my camera back on for this sort of discussion session.
I think that's a great idea. We can see you again. All right. I think some people are slipping away at the half hour here.
Yep.
It's lunchtime for some people.
Well, certainly. Thanks everybody for joining. I'll definitely stick around for the next half hour and do the office hours if people have more specific questions tied to their work or whatever. But
let me just show my screen for a second. A couple people let me know they have to go.
Where I'll stop sharing here.
I have multiple screens going on here too, so bear with me. That one, I just need to share it. Just want to remind people that we are back again, same time next week, Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, for applications. And Ben gave us a nice lead up to that session where he showed you how to get into Pit Cleaner, which is what Kevin C. will be talking about. We will also have Brian Mashoff from Salmonetics with some more tools about cleaning and organizing pit tag data. So we'll have a tag team next week. I think we have about half hour for each of them, maybe 45 minutes with Q&A, and then the same 11:30 to 12 office hours. So definitely tune in next week. We seem to have figured out the calendar moment we had last week. So look for the calendar invitation from Amy Poles if you're new. If you got this forwarded to you from someone else, let us know and we'll make sure to add you to the invite list. All right, I think you can still see Ben. We don't need to rush off. If anyone, I think I actually even have a slide for office hours. Soothing, relaxing slide, looks like sunrise somewhere. Any questions for Ben? Any comments to share? I think I saw Kevin and Brian online too, if you want to drop some ideas for them for next week, just to add to their presentation. Sorry, Brian and Kevin. Go ahead.
Just a clarification. I thought we were going to have 45 minutes each and then half hour for a thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, it's just.
Exactly. Sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to startle you. We have 90 minutes. Yeah, no, we have 90 minutes for presentation and then this 30-minute office hour, which I think if you were here last week, we kind of went into the office hour with the presentations. The idea is we don't want to rush you. So sorry for my offhand comment there, Brian. So you don't have to start whittling, especially as I just invited people to throw more ideas at you. So yeah, sorry. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Questions for Ben? Some thank yous. Oh, I'm seeing people slip away, Ben. I'm seeing some applause.
Yep.
Thumbs up. I will also say that we have recorded this and we will share it to PNAM YouTube's channel as always. And Amy Poles will send an email to everyone on this call and actually all the invitees, I believe, not just the participants. You'll get that email, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, Monday, I think it is. It's taking us a little bit of time to process the video, and we'll get it posted. We'll let everyone know, and there'll also be a reminder for next week's. So stay tuned. And then there is also 2 more weeks after next week. So save your Thursdays for the PNAP Fish Monitoring Work Group Pit Tag Data Analysis webinar series. We are not getting any shorter with our names of things here at PNAP. People are very appreciative as newcomers to GitHub.
Yep.
I like it.
Good. I'm glad people hopefully found this useful. I'm wondering if maybe if people don't have questions about the demo or what we talked about, maybe if anybody's used GitHub before, if they just want to talk about their experiences, if they've, if they think it adds an unnecessary amount of work on top of the work they're already doing, or if they found more that it actually facilitates their work rather than impedes it. I don't know. Just one idea maybe for a discussion. Sure. As opposed to just office hours where people have questions.
That's a great prod there, Ben. People have comments about their own experiences, either positive or less positive. Other workarounds. I see Kevin's got his hand up. But I don't hear you, Kevin. Are you muted? I can see your mouth moving, but cannot hear you.
Any better?
Yep, there you go. We got you now.
All righty. I'll say, Ben, that was a great question. For my own work, I think it's a wonderful way to deal with version control issues. You pointed out, I mean, you can try some things. Turns out after a week or two working on something, yeah, that was a terrible mistake, and you'd really like to roll things back. This makes it very easy. Kind of go back to a certain commit and say, hey, just reset all of my files to this one. So that's been really helpful. Also found it pretty useful as a collaborative tool with other folks. I know there are much more detailed, complicated ways to use Git in collaboration. I've only had experience with, like groups of 2 or 3 people, but it is nice rather than trying to email files back and forth, or it makes it easier to see, oh, this is exactly what you're trying to change. Yeah, I agree with that. Or, yeah, no, I think you missed something. Let's rethink this, whether that's code, data, writing. So yeah, it is one more step in the whole process. It's one more layer on your workflow, but I found once I got used to it, it was not very burdensome at all, and kind of flowed right in.
Yep. I ditto to everything you said there. I mean, that's basically been my collaborative experience as well. I haven't ever, pushed changes to one of these massive, many users, R packages, those sorts of things where I have an idea for an improvement. I haven't quite gone out onto that limb yet. Working with other people sort of on our own projects, that's kind of how I've used it as well. Yep.
I'll mention one other bonus before. Sorry, Russell, to cut you off. But I've used that issues tab extensively just for my own work to kind of make notes of, hey, I really want to go back and try this or that. And as a way to note those things, sometimes it's not something I can work on right then, and I come back 6 months later, and it's a nice way pretty straightforward way to document thoughts or ideas you had, and ways to come back to it without jotting it down in a notebook somewhere that is now lost under my desk.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. That is an excellent question, Ben. I see Russ Scranton has his hand up. Russ, are you weighing in on your GitHub experiences or some other thread?
Those GitHub comments, I guess. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The comment I was going to make is that I think Kevin started to allude to version control, version management, and some of the things that I've seen is as people change their code, change their equations. I think one of the things we're trying to look at with monitoring resources is Windows to GitHub. But we do recommend versions of the old tools that you do have, not just overriding them, because if those were used to create a certain product, the ability to recreate those things or share those, it's just good for documentation process. So managing versions there, managing linking that information to protocols and methods is helpful. We've had a few users and organizations start to do that with monitoring resources, and upcoming monitoring resources is trying to look to put better windows to directly display information from GitHub. Jen, you may want to speak to that a little. So I think there's lots of applications that are great for our community. And I want to thank Ben for the presentation.
Thanks, Russ. That is a good reminder. Monitoring resources is, we're always striving to keep it active, up to date with how people are doing things. And one of our premise from day one is we're trying to help people not have to document things in multiple places, right? And so MR started long before people were using Git, to be honest. And so now we're trying to adapt monitoring resources to this new tool, and encourage people to use Git by making it easy for them to follow through on monitoring resources content. So there is a new window, as Russ put it. I'm going to confess, I don't think I can accurately describe it right now. It's a brand new thing. It's in development. I think we have some aspect of it working. Ryan Kinsert and Esper's Tribe, he's been sort of our guinea pig. Thank you, Ryan, if you're out there, to get some of his analytical methods documented that way. He's done them very thoroughly in Git. And again, we don't want to say, hey, do this work over in this other environment to comply with a request from your funder, for example. We're trying to make it easy for people to find his good work through monitoring resources in Git. And so we're working on that, and stay tuned. It'll be under development more this summer, and I think come fall we'll do a MR updates kind of webinar for everybody. So I see Kevin makes a comment about GitHub providing an easy way to tag your repository. So that's a good idea too, to pay attention to over time. Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else with Git experiences to share? Something drives you crazy. That was a good question, Denise, that she directed to Ben, is particular to the desktop version. If but any other thoughts like that? Something's driving you crazy, so you figured out a way around it or through it. That's a really good thing to share with others. We asked that question in 6 months. People are like, hey, you got Ben's 101. Let's come back together and share your experiences now that you're ready for lecture 201 next time. Anybody? Any other thoughts, Ben?
Nothing I can really think of. Just if you do get into the working collaboratively with other people, it becomes really important to not make commits to the main branch itself. This is something I talked about in the ETIS webinar. But if multiple people are committing to main and you're not pulling appropriately, then there's going to be commits on your version of main that don't exist on other people's versions of main. And that will really cause some ugly conflicts. The solution to that is branching. You make all of your changes to some branch, and then when you're done with those changes, then you submit those to the team, and they can look over your branch and say, yeah, this stuff is good. And that way you're all working from the sort of same launch off point. And then once people want to merge in that branch, then everybody pulls. Now they have the most current version again. So that is the main, no pun intended, aspect of working with a team on something is the branches become really, really important. And that's not to say multiple people can't work on the same branch at a time, but that might just require a little bit more close communication to make sure you've pulled the exact right, that you're at the same point in the branch development as someone else too, just working alongside with them. Yep.
Sounds like really strong tools for collaboration, because you can really easily reuse someone else's stuff, but make it your own and have that documented thread, which again
Definitely.
is
Yeah,
back to
you can
Russ's
see
comments
exactly what
about
changes you made that are make your version different than someone else's. Yeah.
right. Yep. Very cool. And it's free, right? I think you touched on that at the beginning.
It is. Yep. There
is
are
amazing.
paid versions. There's a paid account, but honestly, I don't know what it offers in addition to the free account. It used to be that the free account had a limited number of private repositories, but I think that is now either lifted to some massive amount that you're never going to hit, or it's just totally, there's no limit on free repository or on private repositories anymore. The other thing that I think maybe comes with paying is what they're calling sort of continuous integration, where you're actually having GitHub Online do some calculations. You're using computer time on their servers to do something. And you might have a limit on the free account for how much computer time you're using. Maybe a paid account gives you some more of that computation time. But it's not like a supercomputer where you're sending massive compute jobs. It's more like what I use that for example is my profile page. For all my articles, I have it calculate how many citation counts are on my articles, and then every week it renders our markdown document automatically for me. So if I had a paper cited that week, I don't have to go in and change the numbers manually. But it's very low compute time. So I don't, pay for
That's cool.
the extra time.
That might be something other people are interested in. Way to keep your profile page up to date and show off your citations without having to do a search, etc.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. Nice. Just realized I don't have my camera on. I could turn that on. Everyone could turn their camera on at this point. Sorry. Any other questions? Okay. A little more time, or thoughts about Git, or workarounds, or things you wish Git would do that it doesn't. Seems like it's one of these constantly evolving things. So if it doesn't do what you want, it might come up soon.
The other thing to mention maybe is that there are other alternatives. GitHub seems to be the most popular, but there are a couple others that do virtually the same. It's this sort of central clearinghouse for your code project, and you can have collaborators. They use, Git is still sort of the main version control infrastructure underpinning it, but what are some of the others? One might be called, I think, Bitbucket is one. The others are escaping me now, but there's a handful of other of these frameworks that still basically doing the same thing, but you're not using something called GitHub. You're using something called something else.
Right.
Another thing I want to mention too,
with things like Jupyter notebooks or other kinds of digital resources. We're starting to see integrations across, right?
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah. No more lab notebooks. I'm not going to date myself and say I had a lab notebook with the duplicate paper, but yeah. And you tore off a sheet and left it. Yeah, I had those. This is awesome.
There's another thing. I talked about RStudio as being another sort of interface for using Git, making your commits, adding what files you want to commit, adding your commit messages. there are other, softwares in addition to this GitHub Desktop. I like GitHub Desktop because it's sort of straight and to the point, has just the features that I need, and the interface is really straightforward. There's another one that I explored using called Git Kraken, and it is massive. It has a lot of features, and I think it actually does have issues integrated where you can make issues, change them. It seemed a little overwhelming to me, to be honest. I really was just looking for something that allowed me to interact with the basics of Git, push and pull, commit files, make new branches, merge branches. But if you're looking for something beyond what just regular GitHub Desktop can do, Git Kraken is another one that might be worth exploring.
I think our crowd is thinning, Ben. We've got a handful of folks out there. So maybe this is a good time to wrap up and say, join us next week. Stay tuned for an email Monday from Amy Poles with a link to the YouTube channel. And we'll also have Ben's email and also a link to the resources we shared at the start of this. There are all of Ben's links. So stay tuned for that on Monday. I want to extend a huge thanks to Ben for all his preparation to make this a very effective time here. And I'm delighted to see so many people join us and stay with it. Awesome. All right, we're going to sign off. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I hope you have not too many plants, just enough plants.
Great.
The allergy season. Take care.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.